We go to the north. We go to the Pacific Northwest and bring in our buddy Niko. Welcome back, my friend.
Hey, what's going on, guys? I'm coming remote to you guys, so I'm trying to give myself the best lighting, but it looks like I have some sort of yellow fever here. I'm not really sure, but I'm trying to do my best, guys. Wanted to be on. Just been running around as I prepare myself to take 2 weeks off from other work things. So yeah, just wanted to come on, say hello. How's everybody doing?
All right, man. It is me and it is Jarrett and it is you, sir, as we break things down before Christmas. How's the Christmas shopping, by the way? Are you done?
Yes, finally done. Yesterday, I got my brother Bob Marley poncho. He wears that type of thing, like uh, the cloth ponchos. He wears those type of things. So I ended up getting him one of those, and that was the last one. Thankfully, all that shopping is done. Malls have been crazy, so I'm excited to be done.
All right. One of the topics that has come out on the Twitch pitch is the coaching carousel. And since you haven't been on in 2 weeks, there have been some folks that have assumed some duties, and there are still some teams that are looking for some coaches. When you look at the folks that are now in the barn, Charlotte's got Dean Smith, New England's got Caleb Porter, and we still have some absences. Let's talk about the ones that have been filled. Bruce Arena's still out there, as a matter of fact. So the guys that are now in as the new head coaches in Major League Soccer, what do you think?
I thought the Dean Smith one made some sense, at least for a guy that's experienced, that's has dealt with failing franchises that he has kind of revamped and moved to new levels, and really been able to recover the trajectory of a club. Uh, so in that sense, it makes sense. In theory, in the guy you're bringing in, what you're hoping he can accomplish, but I don't know if he fits the style of players that are in Charlotte. He kind of talked about the module of soccer he wants to implement, and I'm not sure if the players that he has currently are going to be able to execute that. We still don't know what's going to happen with Soderski. Is Copetti going to stay there? Doesn't feel like Copetti fits his style of play. So there's just so many question marks in terms of what the coach is likely to do on the field and what he has in the locker room. That is it going to be more of a complete rebuild? We're going to throw everything out on a fire sale and then bring a whole bunch of new players? Or am I going to try to kind of work with what I have and maybe give myself a year before I can really make some big changes? So that's kind of what my thoughts were on Dan Smith. I'm a little bit apprehensive to say this is going to be a full-on great move, as maybe some analysts and some fans have kind of commented and explained to me why they believe he's the right guy for the job. And Caleb Porter, I don't know, he fits over there. He's an old MLS guy with his own character, and sometimes can be a little bit rough around the edges. But I think that's a team that, unlike Charlotte, has a lot of quality players. Maybe gives Caleb Porter maybe a lot more to work with, whether he wants to play in that same style that he played in Columbus, if he wants to maybe change it up. Has he learned anything throughout this time with that being a coach? Maybe he goes in with a different style. So I like that move a lot more than I like Charlotte's.
Jarrett, go for it.
Okay, let's talk about the coaches that are still in the league. Of the ones that have been that are still employed, who do you think, if because we're going to do this in the early part of the season anyway, who do you think is the ones to watch for early season hot seat action?
Ooh, that's a good question. I love that. That's a good question. I would put Brian Smetzer up there. I
Yeah.
think that if Brian Smetzer this season has a lot of meaningfulness behind it, right? 50 years. Uh, you think that might give him a little bit more cushion, but I think that is gonna do the opposite. It's gonna put all the lights, all the reflectors right upon the team. And if they're unable to have a quick start, if that locker room that has so many personalities that now are either moving on or looks like they will be moving on, um, if he can really manage that and that results in some lost games and inability to uh, provide the fans with that success they're used to, you're going to start hearing it from the fan base. You're going to start hearing it from media. Uh, I think we all can agree that the CCL championship and the previous success has given him some room for error, but I think that is gone. I think that that credit card is full. So if Brian Smetzer cannot start off successfully next season, I think he could be in the hot seat. Um, what's another coach that I think would be in the hot seat? I think Gary Smith.
Okay.
I think Gary Smith is a guy that a lot like Brian has had a lot of leadway because he's done a lot with what initially was a little. He was able to create an identity. He took this team over and over again, far in the playoffs. But as we've talked many of times here, everybody's waiting for the next step and they haven't taken that yet.
Yeah.
So if he cannot have a real successful start to the season, maybe management and that owning group starts thinking perhaps it's time for us to move on, go elsewhere, and start thinking about bringing in someone else. And yeah, those are the two that really come to mind.
What about Vanny?
Ooh, yeah, that's another one. I mean, he didn't do himself any favors with all the shenanigans and outbursts this season. But I don't know. I think that he's done enough with a team that I wasn't thinking was going to be as good as they were. I think that the locker room respects him. So I wouldn't put him there. I don't think he's maybe in a hot seat. But it could certainly change. But I think that he has the right mentality for the group. The group respects him, and management seems to have a real idea about the time he's going to need to turn that program around.
All right, Jarrett, go for it.
Yeah, so to your point about that, like, how do you thread that needle of, hey, we want results now versus not getting stuck in that cycle that we see so many clubs get stuck in, where they're just changing managers like every year or two, and then they just kind of get stuck in that whirlpool and they can't pull themselves out. How do you avoid that mess?
Yeah, well, I think, and look, this is just me. I think it's ridiculous to sometimes spend 6 months, 12 interviews, and 6 candidates for you to go out and give a guy a year where he has to come and work with what you have. He's going to have to figure out a lot of things from where players are at their best, culture of the club, and all of these things that surround putting your curriculum into effect and then fire him after a year or even less than that. You know, you go to other leagues, like Liga MX or, you know, South America, sometimes guys don't even get a year. So I think that's just ridiculous. Every time that you hire a guy, you should be confident enough in your process, in your vetting process, that if you took and you take enough time to look for the right intangibles, to look for the right fit is huge. So you don't end up with a Frank de Boer or you don't end up with a guy like Losada that seems to be over and over again, brought in, talked to, interviewed, and then when me, you, Jared, my mom, we all know the way he's about, they're like, oh, what are you doing, man? Well, we're going to have to let you go because you're just too intense. Man, you knew that coming on. So I just think that regardless of who you hire, you got to give them at least a 2-year trial, and then figure out if what he's done is enough. And unless there's something outrageous or scandalous, and we've had those in MLS as well, where a guy says something that he shouldn't say, or he's doing things he shouldn't be doing, then you kick him out the door. But other than that, you got to give a coach enough time to build his system and see if he can take you to the promised land.
Now, we still have a couple of openings, and it's DC, it's Montreal, and technically still it's Minnesota, because Minnesota has decided, tell you what, we're going to stick with our interim right now because our sporting director isn't going to be here until after the first of the year. So we're going to stick with our interim, and we're cool. Right now, Montreal has interviewed Laurent Courtois from Columbus Crew 2. They have talked to Gio Savarese, and you wonder who's going to put up with all the ish that Joey Saputo delivers on a daily basis. And Bob Bradley, I think, was a part of this discussion too. At the end of the day, Bob Bradley was New England, but at the end of the day in Montreal, you've got to want to put up with Joey Saputo's ish. In DC, there's talk that it could be Bruce Arena. We've been lobbying for John Harkes ever since he left Greenville in USL League One. And for God's sake, somebody do something in Minnesota with some kind of permanence. When you look at these openings, and Chicago just decided to keep Frank Klopas, when you look at these openings, what are you looking at with these folks? What do you have any kind of a vibe whatsoever on these openings and who might be jumping into these spots?
Yeah, I really do believe that if I have to put a round peg in a round hole and a square one in a square one, I think that out of the vacancies, and I would call it the high-profile candidates, DC United would seem to be okay with a guy like Bruce Arenas, and not just okay, but I feel like he's a guy that gives them a little bit of a splash, which is something that they like to do. I understand that he kind of goes away from what I don't know if they've angled towards with the Wayne Rooney hire. Yeah. And that's why I get the other names that have been being brought up. But I think that because of the history of the club, because of the urgency to get some results, because DC United has turned into a bit of a joke. They quite honestly have not been relevant in quite some time, despite having a big market, you could say, in some senses, the historic approach of DC United. So bringing a guy like Bruce that just seems to have the
gravitas,
the prestige behind it to maybe be a guy that maybe players want to go play for. If I'm an MLS veteran, if I'm in free agency, even he has a good rapport with many players out abroad. So can he bring somebody in? I think that's important for a team like DC United. So if I had to pick, I think he's a clear-cut favorite for that spot. And then in Giovanni Savarese, I don't think he would fit in Montreal. And it's not just the language; it's just the players that are there. Is the style?
It's Joey Saputo. It's like it's the owner. Do you want to put up with him meddling every day?
Exactly. And look, Giovanni Savarese, he is a fiery guy, and he's a guy that, although respectful, he could crash with someone who's trying to tell him what to do. He doesn't want to be the offensive coordinator or the special teams guy. He wants to be the head coach. And sometimes when you go to a lot of these teams, you might be the head coach on paper, but you're really just the special team guy, because they're going to tell you who to hire, when to hire, what to do. So I don't see Giovanni Savarese being someone that it's okay with putting up with that. So I think Minnesota, with the players that they have, with the talent, with that market, with a team that could probably benefit from a charismatic, energetic guy in the sidelines that the fan base can easily identify with, and maybe you grow that because you need to grow that in Minnesota. Plus, just the style of players that you have there, I think he would be the perfect candidate. Now, I have not heard anything. I've been following the Giovanni Savarese tracks like Spectre Gadget, and I have yet to really find where he could be landing. But I feel like I'm doing enough work on the ground that maybe we'll get something within the next week and a half. So I'm hoping that at least after Christmas I have something at least to report on it. But I am on those tracks to figure out where a guy that I rate extremely high, like Giovanni Savarese, could land.
Jarrett, what's on your mind?
Yeah, and you mentioned as well that fit and that not being told what to do. That was my question for Charlotte. Is you bring in a guy like Dean Smith who's very experienced, but you have an owner in Tepper who likes to have his say in things, and I want to see how that clashes and how they're able to manage that relationship to have that stability. Because we were talking before you came on about the league pushing Toronto and Charlotte as two teams that they really want to see succeed, but both of them have a lot of questions coming into this year, and it's great for the league if they're good, but they gotta right their own ship in the process.
Yeah, and I think Tapper wants them bad enough where I have no doubt in my mind where Dan Smith said, look, if I'm coming, this is exactly what I'm expecting. These are my bullet points of what I need to get done. And with the desperation from that Charlotte should have, because they have such a beautiful stadium. They have such a good brand, for the crown. I love that. I buy that thing up. I mean, if I was in Charlotte, man, I'd be just geared up on that For the Crown stuff. So it's just such a good brand, and there's so much good out of it other than the roster, to be quite honest. But I think that they have wanted him for a long time. There were reports that he had been there in a Red Bulls game while it was still not his team, but he was visiting his kid who plays soccer nearby, and he came through. I think that there's been conversations, and nobody would ever, say that exactly, because you're not supposed to do that sort of thing. But I think that there's been so much desire for this guy where they might just allow him to do whatever he wants.
Schedules came out and yesterday, and you've also had some player movement up there in Seattle. So now that the schedule is out and you are stacked for home matches at the tail end of the schedule to make another Zombie Sounders run if it comes to that. But what's the latest on player movement up there in the Pacific Northwest with Seattle? And when you stared at the schedule, what'd you think?
Okay, let's start with the schedule. I didn't really see anything outstanding aside from the fact that, again, we don't get much up against Inter Miami, which is sad for everybody, regardless of whether we would get to see Messi here or not, or even go over there. I like the LAFC matchup. I think that's the one that really stands out because it's a rematch of that unfortunate elimination by the Seattle Sounders here at home. I think that's one that I feel like is starting to become a really good rivalry when things with Portland have kind of died down, especially now with the new coach and things like that. It's still the rivalry. Don't get me wrong. It's still the rivalry. But I feel like when you lose some of those headliners and when you lose some of those protagonists, even Gio Savarese was not someone that Brian hated, and Gio didn't hate Brian, but there was a little bit of a Gio owned you. He's now that he's gone, I guess he owned you for his time with the Timbers. Those games are always fun, but I think the LAFC matchup is interesting. And in terms of player movement, Seattle did their thing at the MLS Super Draft. I wouldn't expect any of those guys to come in and be immediate starters, but Pedro de la Vega, I'm told the negotiations have finally starting to look like they're going to finalize. There's still some medical requirements that are going to be being processed here within the next week, but it looks like that's going to be a done deal. So that's going to be your new young DP. How's he going to start? Where he's going to play? What does that mean for guys like Leo Chu? Are you going to play him at the 10? Are you going to play him out wide? I would think that with you picking up Albert Rusnak's option and what he did at the 10 position, you probably will start with Albert there, meaning that the guy left out of that band of 3 would be Leo Chu, who would hit the bench. Pedro would ultimately play the left side, continuing with Christian Roldana on the right side and Jordan Morris up top. I'm okay with that. Jordan Bell from San Luis City. That was a guy that the Seattle Sounders picked up in the re-entry draft. I really like that move. I think it's a little bit underrated. I've talked to guys that have followed him throughout his time with the All Caps team, and they really like his athleticism. He seems to be a workhorse. He seems to be versatile, where if needed, he could push out wide, meaning fullback position. So he seems to have all of the Seattle Sounders check marks: versatility, coachable, athletic. So I like that move. I'm not expecting any other bigger moves for Seattle. I know that they're looking for a DP9 striker, but it sounds like something that is going to come to fruition in the summer. I would expect that move in the second window. So how Seattle can move what they currently have, it's going to give them a lot of leadway for what other moves can come about. So Javier Arriaga definitely will be out before the start of the next season, in my opinion. Craig Weibel, during the end of the season press conference, told us, we've had interest, we've had calls, but you're going to have to come with a real offer if you want Javier, because we know he can win championships. We know that he's a guy that we value extremely high, so we're not going to give him for a pack of gum and some potato chips, so you better bring it. He actually said, that they're coming with the thought process that we don't want him, and that's not true. We want him. It's just that there's obviously other players in front of him. So I think that he's a guy that eventually will be gone. So what do you do with that money? Where do you put that in your roster? And then Raul Ruidiaz. I will stick to my guns and say that I talked to Brian. I asked Craig Weibel directly, because Brian had just said that there was going to be competition between Jordan Morris and Raul Ruidiaz. And my question was, look, in a salary cap league, it is not ideal for your $3 million salary guy to be competing for a position. I mean, once you commit to a guy for a $3 million salary, he should be your starter, or you should think and hope that that's going to be the case. But that doesn't seem to be what Brian thinks. So I still feel like whether that works out or not, that could potentially be a domino effect on what Seattle could do early next season. But that's what we got going on here in the Pacific Northwest.
All right. Before you go, what are Christmas plans, and are you hanging out with us next week, or are you taking the week off?
I am not taking the week off from you guys, because this is a terrible, awful way to leave 2004 with me, with this flashlight looking light in front of me. I do not want that to be the last thing that our SDH family sees from Niko Moreno. So I'll absolutely make the effort, and I commit to being with you guys next week, hopefully with some, I'm going to promise this. If it's not something 100% in stone, in terms of a rumor for either Seattle or MLS, I will give you something that is in the works, because I feel like I owe you for this episode, so I'm gonna give you some really good stuff next week in terms of rumors, and we'll break it here on SDH before Twitter, before everything.
You are the man. At El Rolo and W, at Sports Pulso, at the Soccer Bar. Soccer Bar coming up later today.
Yes, Soccer Bar coming up later today. Will give me time to get to some office or something where I could actually sit down. But yes, we have a really good one. We have Felipe Cardenas with us. We're kind of doing post MLS programs. Last week we had Claudio from Charlotte with us. We had Santiago Beltran from All City. So we're reaching out to all of our Latino journalists, analysts to talk about the teams. Today we have Felipe and Abramowitz from New York City FC. I am skipping on his first name, but it should be a good one. These are top of the crop when it comes to journalists in MLS. So check that out. It's going to be a good one.
And Badger is saying that he's requesting that you send smoked salmon pastries from Piroshki. That is a request from Badger.
Absolutely, man. If I could get that over to you guys, that'd be a great press. And believe me, I'm a Piroshki guy myself. I have the luxury to at times be at lunchtime at Pike Place Market. So yeah, those are good. Those are good.
All right, my friend. We will catch up with you next week before we turn the calendar. Thanks for hanging out.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate y'all. Have a good one. We'll see you next week.
All right, that's